The Wellington Gardens and the surrounding houses were built in the Victorian era by Sir Samuel Morton Peto. He was a renowned civil engineer and entrepreneur, as well as serving as a Member of Parliament for 2 decades. He was also responsible for helping to construct the Lowestoft train station and the port, which enabled Lowestoft to become a thriving hub of travel and trade. As the town grew, he constructed large terraces of houses to accommodate the growing number of residents, some of which can be seen across the road from the gardens. Other notable buildings that Peto constructed include Nelson's Column and the Lyceum Theatre in London, as well as the railway lines between Norwich, Lowestoft and Ipswich. These gardens and the land they cover still belongs to the owners of Wellington Terrace and were constructed so that nearby residents and visitors to Lowestoft could come and enjoy the refreshing sea air whilst remaining in the comfort of the gardens themselves. This was a popular recreation activity during this period, and many argued that there were positive health benefits to breathing in the salty air. The construction of Claremont Pier began in 1902 and it was completed in 1903. The Coast Development Company oversaw its construction, and it was designed to be a mooring pier for Bell steamers, which were primarily used to carry goods and passengers up and down the coast. It was named Claremont Pier due to its proximity to Claremont Road, and originally stretched 600 feet, or 180 meters, out into the sea. In 1912, the pier was extended and widened to accommodate for a pavilion to be built on it, which brought the total length up to 760 feet, or 230 meters. In 1928, a theatre seating 1,200 people opened on the pier. The last passengers to ever arrive at Claremont Pier were refugees from London in 1939. After then, the pier stopped its steamer services and was instead turned into a defence measure during the Second World War. After 1948, the pier was abandoned and remained derelict for 2 years until the actor George Studd took it over and began to repair the pier. Some of the work included a new pavilion and a reinforced concrete platform to make it safe for visitors. However, in 1962, a storm destroyed a large section of the end of the pier, and it was not fully restored again until the 1980s. This new renovation restored the shorewood end amusements, but the rest of the pier was not. As a result, the deck remained closed to visitors. In 2000, the artist David Ward was commissioned by the District Council to create a visual link between Claremont Pier and the South Pier. The St Elmo's Fire installation was unveiled in 2001 and consists of a group of lights suspended on tall poles which are reflected on the water between the piers. Lowestoft has had a fishing industry since the Middle Ages, and until the 1960s, it was one of the town's largest sources of income. Building of the harbour and railway in the 1800s meant that the fish could be easily transported to other parts of the country. The official opening of the harbour in 1831 and its later expansion attracted fishermen to come to Lowestoft from all over the country. The fishing industry was at its peak between 1890 and the start of World War I, and it is estimated that around 60 million herring were landed in a single day at Lowestoft and Great Yarmouth combined, and up to 400 million herring were typically caught in one season. During this period, there were over 1,100 vessels registered in Lowestoft. These were mostly small fishing vessels, but large trawlers also operated out of the harbour. Catches of fish slowly diminished after the end of the Second World War, and the industry largely collapsed in Lowestoft due to this decline. Only 100 boats remained by the 1980s, and today there are now only a few small boats operating out of Lowestoft, with no large trawlers remaining in the fleet. St. Mary's Convent was part of a complex of buildings that were directed by the Sisters of Mercy, an order of nuns in the Catholic Church. The grand buildings overlook Kirkley Cliffs, and they had several other Roman Catholic affiliated establishments in the Kirkley area. One of these was a boys' school, which had its own playing field constructed by the convent. The site that was used once housed St. Luke's Hospital, which was demolished after the Second World War. St. Mary's Roman Catholic Primary School is one of the buildings in the complex and was opened in 1967. It was built due to the generosity of the Sisters of St. Mary of Namur and the Roman Catholic community of Lowestoft, who raised funds for its construction. The gardens were laid out and built by local unemployed men and were opened to the public in 1922 as a resting spot for those walking down Lowestoft's Esplanade. In the gardens you can find the Richard Henry Reeve Memorial Monument, which is topped with a winged lion and is dedicated to Richard Henry Reeve, a solicitor who would purchase the title Lord of the Manor of Lowestoft. In 1933, the original bandstand was demolished and a small electric boating lake was installed in the gardens, where families would gather for fun at the weekends. The boats ran on electricity that was fed down to the boats through an overhead power supply, much like how modern bumper cars operate today. Later on, the boats were switched to internal motors for safety reasons. The gardens were well known for their variety of flowers, many of which can still be seen today in flowering seasons. The buildings behind the boating lake, once a cafe, is now home to the Lowestoft Model Boat Club, which opened in the 1980s. People can come and sail their model boats on the lake as well as take part in social coffee mornings. While larger boats still operate on the lake, they are now paddle-powered only. Other attractions include aviaries, a Japanese-themed garden, bowling greens and tea rooms. In the 1920s, the highlight of the year was the annual Summer Carnival. Before it was a park, the land was used between 1914 and 1918 to grow crops for the war effort, before being developed into a park by local businessmen Selwyn Humphrey and Arthur Tuttle as part of a scheme to provide work for the town's unemployed. The Centre for Environment, Fisheries and Aquaculture Science, better known as CFAS, is based in the building next to Kensington Gardens. Their work focuses on finding solutions to problems that threaten marine life, including pollution and overfishing. More recently, their focus has been on climate change and how it can be tackled using cutting-edge scientific research. CFAS has been measuring sea temperature since 1880. And they now have 10 million seawater temperature records that they can use to spot trends and predict future sea warming levels. They also collect a variety of organism samples from around the globe to observe the impacts that sea warming is having on different species. Lowestoft's first esplanade was built in the 1840s and completed in 1847 as part of Petto's improvements to the town. Over the ensuing decades, the esplanade was slowly extended southwards, but it wasn't until the 1930s that it became recognizable as it is today. Lowestoft became a thriving hub of tourism, as well as the booming fishing industry, with people travelling from places such as London and Norwich to enjoy the sea air and the attractions the town had to offer. During the 1790s, Lowestoft's fishing community established their own beach village on the Denes and beach below the cliffs. This slowly developed as more people moved there, and historian Edmund Gillingwater recorded that 76 buildings were erected between 1791 and 1806. Following the huge fishing boom of the town, the beach village became overpopulated, with over 2,700 people living in just 500 very small homes. Almost everybody living on the beach village worked in the fishing industry, or one of the many supporting industries. These included net, rope and sail makers, ship lamp makers, and boat repairers. The beach had 13 pubs, a church and chapels, a brewery, and Lowestoft's first gasworks. As well as this, there were newsagents, several bakeries, grocers, a dairy, a butcher, and even a barber's. This meant that many people never had to leave the surroundings of what came to be known as the town below the cliff. In the 1950s and 1960s, the beach village fell into decline due to repeated storms and flooding, the most severe of which occurred in 1953, the worst flooding in the history of the East Coast. This particular flood devastated 400 homes, and subsequently residents decided to move out of the beach village for good, rather than try and rebuild it.